Welcome to this episode of Chat with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Larry Rolla. What's up, Larry?
Hi.
So we got a picture of the infamous, the guy who was wanting the money every week.
Yeah, that's Gilbert. I think that picture must have been taken when he was in jail because he died in jail, and that's an old picture. That's
So he had your feet in a barrel, huh?
yeah. I kind of knew that that you see that them guys back then they're just like the mob guys, today and back then. The guys that are in the street, the soldiers or the associates, they're all scuffling around for money, and they're all hustling and shylocking and bookmaking and doing everything they can. And Cabert was basically the same way. I mean, they were days when he was broke and robbing and stealing, and then somebody like me comes along and he winds up making a lot of money. So I took a shot at him only because of my addiction, not for any other. I mean, I don't have a death wish, but sometimes you don't even think about anything except your addiction. You just got to get to fix it. The chase is like it's non-stoppable sometimes.
Yeah.
And he took a lot. He got a lot of money from me, and I was just cash cow. So it's not like he lent me $300,000 and it was his money that I didn't pay back. It was a bet. It was like, if you give me 10,000 and I don't pay you, you got a reason to hit me in the head with a bat. But if I just make a bet with you, a $10,000 bet, and I lost, and then I'm a little, late paying, it's not the same thing. It's completely different,
Yeah.
especially if I lost $1 million the year prior. So I kind of knew it, but what worried me was that he's such a fucking loose cannon that he's liable to do anything. Sometimes how do you make sense of a psychopath? It's so who knows? But it worked out all right. It was a tough 4, 5, 6 years. Went through a lot, learned a lot, but them are the life lessons, and it's amazing to me, because to me that was a way of life. Even from the time I was a kid, even getting in trouble and everything, it was that was a whole way of life to me. I knew what I liked. I knew what I wanted. I didn't want to be in gangs. I didn't want to be in the mob. I didn't want nobody telling me what to do. I basically did my own thing. And the good thing about the highs and the lows is that you learn a lot of lessons to be learned. And I'll give you an example. And this was after all the bad stuff was over. This was during the good years. In 1981, I had, with the help of Charles Susky and Stanley Dancer and a lot of very important people in the harness racing game, they basically gave me a new life, and I took advantage of it, and I became very successful. And I won a big race called the Cane Pace with Wildwood Jeb. And in fact, that whole thing is on my podcast, that whole race and what happened, how I got into it. So I decided to have a party for all my owners and all my friends. So from 78 until 1978 until 2001, I was doing well. And I decided to have a party, a Christmas party. And I start writing down all the people. Now I had 7 of the wealthiest owners in the country, plus I had maybe another 4 or 5 other owners. And it was like one big happy family. So I started writing down, I call each one up, who would you like to come to this party? And they gave me and then my friends, and then the people that worked for me. I had about 30 people working for me and their family. By the time it was over, I had almost 3,000 people for the party, and I was fine. So now I had to find a place to put it. So I tried to get Madison Square Garden. The problem, and I got it. They wanted 30,000 for the night, but I got it. But I couldn't house the people because a lot of people come from out of town. So I'll make this real short.
Now you got plenty of time. We got 25 minutes left, or 35.
But there's 30 years to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, I nixed that. I nixed that, and I was looking for a place where it had to be out of the city because there was no place to house a lot of these people. So I went to Bobby Parker. Bobby Parker owned the Concord Hotel in Monticello. And I says, Bobby, every year you close your hotel for 10 days for general cleanup. I says, do me a favor, open it up 3 days earlier. I want to have a party. I'll have your full staff and everything. And whatever it is, it is. So he says, okay, that's fine. How many people? And I says, close to 3,000. He says, well, you can't have 3,000 because I only have, I think, 1,200 rooms or something like that. He says, so you got to cut it down to like 1,000 people. So I got a friend of mine, Joe Murata, and I start cutting it down. I says, Jesus Christ, at that time I thought I had 30 solid friends and acquaintances that would they put me on a pedestal. They thought I was the greatest, and they would do anything for me. But I had to start eliminating people, and it was a very tough thing for me to do. So I eliminated people, and I wound up having a party, and it turned out to be a 3-day party. We had it filmed and everything, and I had my own group. I had an 18-piece show group at the time, and I had Andre and Sorrell open for them, and a comedian open for them, and the whole thing was great. And many years later, well, I was in 81, so in 86 I get barred for life. By 84 I get barred for life. In 86,
what was the reason you got barred for life?
They had a when my father died, I used to go up to because I moved my mother up to Monticello. When my father died, 73, I used to go up to Monticello almost every Sunday and take my mother for lunch at the racetrack. And one Sunday I was there in 84, and I was sitting with my mother having lunch. And one of the kids that used to work for me, now remember, in the 70s, I was fixing races up there. I had a crew of guys, and we'd fix races, and we'd make, we'd make a couple of thousand every night. And to them, that was a lot of money. And to me, it was a lot of money because you wind up making $5,000-$10,000 a week. And some of these guys were penniless and living as many of the trainers and drivers at smaller tracks do. So anyway, I'm sitting there with my mother, and one of the kids come up to me, and they say, "You're going to be here for the last race?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Bet these numbers." Now, the kid that come up to me used to work for me. Is a really good kid, and I got him his license and everything. He became a driver through the years. And as usual, because Monticello is a small track with no handle and everybody's starving to death there, they usually try to fix 1 or 2 races a day. And the last race was always usually the race they fix for a couple of reasons. One reason, it was usually a trifecta or a superfecta race where the handle was a lot bigger. And the second reason is the judges really scrutinized the race because it was the last race. They just wanted to get the hell out of there and go home.
Yeah.
So he gives me these numbers, and I said, thank you, and that was it. He left. So now the last race comes, and I asked the waitress for the check, and my mother completely naive, has no idea about racing, nothing, and she says to me, I says, come on, Ma, let's go. We'll beat the traffic, because I always parked in valet. And if you don't get down there, if you go down there after the last race, you got to wait for a half hour to get your car. So the valet guy always knew to pull my car up before the last race, and I get right in it. So she says, aren't you going to bet like a little innocent kid, aren't you going to bet what that little boy told you? And I says, why? She says, well, he told you to bet it. Why don't you bet it? So I says, all right, Ma. So I bet the race. And the numbers he gives me wins. And it was a fixed race with all the favorites out. So anyway, I bet for her, and I cashed the tickets, and I think she got 1,000 or 1,500, whatever she got. And she was happy as hell. And everything was fine. About 3-4 weeks later, I'm up there again with my mother, and the track security comes to me and says, Joe Landau, who was the guy who ran the racetrack at the time, wants to see you upstairs. So I go upstairs, and I walk in the room, and there was the state police, the racing commission, everybody was there. And they said to me, what do you know about this race? And they showed me the race. I says, I don't know nothing. And they says, well, you have to know something. You were there. I says, well, let me tell you something. You people know me a long time. This was in 1984 now. You people know me since 1971. You know I gamble. You know my whole life. You know everything I did. And now that Charles Sutsky died, who was my mentor, he died. He owned the racetrack. He died young. Now that he died, you do nothing but break my chops all the time. And that's the reason I shipped out of here, because I got tired of your harassment. You're just trying to nail me for something because he protected me.
Yeah.
So I says, you know my story, and you're asking me about a race that happened 4 or 5 weeks ago. I says, I bet every race every day. I have no idea what if I bet that race or not. I says, but if it's going to make your investigation easier, tell me what to say, and I'll say it. Because I wasn't in the race. I had no horses at the racetrack. I was here as a spectator. So I'm allowed to bet and do whatever I want to do. But because I'm licensed by the state, I understand I have to cooperate during an investigation. So what do you want to know? So they says, we want to know who told you to bet these numbers, because they had computerized machines at the time. We got the printout. We got the teller who identified you, because all the tellers knew me because I was up there for years.
Yeah.
For 10 years. So we got the teller that identified you. We got the printout. We know what you did. We know what you did and everything else. So now we want to know the names of the driver that told you this. And I refused to cooperate, so they barred me. So I got barred for failing to cooperate during an investigation, and I got barred for life. They took my license away, and every year when I reapply, they said, are you really ready to disclose, this information? And I said no. And by 1986, all my appeals ran out. I had 7 homes at the time, 3 trailers, house trailers, and the rest homes in different states. I had cars in every garage and girls in every bedroom. So I was but I lost it all for appeals. I was appealing in 3 different states. And by 1986, I had lost all my appeals and I was penniless. And I was sitting, and there's a little in between there what happened, but I'll get right to basically to the end of the story. I wound up on a park bench, and I used to go to supermarkets and walk around with the cart and fill the cart up and open packages of cookies and crackers and open up a container of milk. And then as I'm walking through the aisles, and then when I was full, I would just leave. And sometimes I'd go into some of the hotels in the back door that back then they used to give a complimentary breakfast, and I used to sneak in there, and I did it. And then one day I woke up, and that went on for about a week. And then one night It was raining. I woke up, I was soaking wet, and I just had enough. And I adjust to anything pretty quickly. I mean, I adjust to being broke quick. I adjust to having millions quick. I adjust to anything. But this was really starting to get me. It's, it's tough when you never have nothing to have nothing. But when you have so much and you know what it's like, and you recognize that when the people say money is not happiness, money is not everything. Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's all cliches and it's all bullshit. In the
Yeah,
real
you got
world.
all these people wanting to be around you all the
Yeah,
time. You got all these friends. When you
right,
don't got no money, you don't have
right.
none of
So now let me tell you. So now where I was sleeping, it was a park bench right at the end of a park, and there was a bus stop on the corner. And back then they had phone booths on the corners. And I asked the guy for a quarter. And I called up my friend Tommy D. Maria. And I says, Tommy, I says, that pistol you have, bring it to me right away. And I told him where I was. And he says, why? What's the matter? I says, just bring the fucking gun, just like that. And about maybe an hour later, up comes my other friend, Joe Murata, the guy who helped me eliminate 2,000 people from my guest list. He says, get in the car. I get in the car. He says, and he's an old, nice old, very smart guy, good guy. And he says, what are you doing? And I says, Joe, I can't. It's going to rob the bank. I get 2 or 3,000. If I get caught, they put me in jail. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm wet. I just need time to clear my head, and I'll be okay. And he takes me to Angelo's restaurant in Lyndhurst. And we're sitting there, and he says, remember 3-4 years ago when I helped you eliminate them people from the list when you thought you had 3,000 friends and everything? He says, today, he says, if you had to have the same party and invite all your friends, all you would need is a table like this. And it was a table for 4. And he says, and there might be 1 seat empty. So smarten up. And that's a lesson you only learn when you have these ups and downs, because if you're born into money or have a steady job or not basically a street guy and just go through life and always paying your bills, you never really know who your friends are. You never know. And that's the sad part about never really hitting bottom, because you never know. You think everybody's your friend and you never know who's going to stick up for you. I mean, there was a kid that worked for me that was a Canadian kid. He wanted to stay in this country. And back then in the 70s, well, in the early 80s, the people that come and get, if you're in this country with immigration,
immigrants.
The immigration department would come and raid racetracks, because the racetracks switched from years ago. The grooms were black, and then as the Mexicans start coming and Spanish people from all over the country, all over the world, they switched to all Mexican grooms, because you pay them a lot less money. And then the immigration would come and take them all away. Well, anyway, this kid was a good groom, top groom, and I loved him, and he worked for me. And he was scared of getting deported. He was from Canada. So what I did was I got him a wife. I give the girl $5,000. I says, marry him, stay married for 2 years, and I'll give you another 5,000. So that's what happened. In the meantime, when I introduced them, they really liked each other. So it worked out well. So I wind up buying them a house, and I bought them 2 cars, and I furnished the house and everything. And this is because he was a good kid. His name was Gillis. He took care of one of my best horses. In fact, he took care of the horse that won the race where I made all that money. So I gave him, and I put, I think, 15 to 20,000 in a bank account for them. And I says, okay, you're on your way. And when all of this happened years later, in 87 or 86, I called him up. I said, Gillis, I need a favor. I need $5,000. And he says, well, what's the matter? And I says, never mind what's the matter. I need $5,000. And he says, well, I'm going to have to ask my wife. And I hung up the phone. And I start making calls, and the people that used to send jet planes for me and helicopters and limousines, they wouldn't even pick up the phone. And then you learn another life lesson. When you have nothing in common with people that can help, they don't help. And you're on your own. And that's the real world. Now, guys that work in an office or in a post office or a cop or a fire, you don't never experience these things. But in the street life, it's a tough life, and you got to be ready for all of these things. And that's why the only good thing I ever did was not really join the mob, because I knew early on I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. I wasn't going to take orders if I didn't take orders from my mother, I wasn't going to take orders from some guy who was a head of a gang or a head of a family, and like, fuck you, and that's it. Just leave me alone. And that's how I ran my life, and that's how I lived my life. Now, I wind up knowing them all only because of the business I was in, and only because of the trouble I got myself into. So, but I always showed up. I always did the right thing. And through the years, I made a lot of good friends out of a lot of mob guys that are not really good guys. But in my life, the guys who helped me the most and who straightened my life out, and Lucchese was one of them, were always the mob guys. And every time I ever got in the jackpot, it was one of these waspy white collar bullshit artists that had nothing but money and power, and just completely abused it, and never held themselves responsible for anything, but held everybody else responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And you live through all of that, and you find all of that stuff out. And another good thing is, through the years living like I lived, you learn how to read people. You can meet somebody in 5 minutes, if he's an asshole or a jerk off or whatever. You just know.
Yeah.
And 5 minutes of talking to them, and these are all the life lessons I learned through the years. Now, if I start from the beginning, and maybe when we started this thing a couple of weeks ago, we should have started from the beginning, but the beginning is not very interesting. And I know that the mob genre now is taking over the whole world, and I have a lot of them stories.
Like this guy.
Yeah, that's really the guy that's one of the guys that started this whole thing with when he called me up that time. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the other podcast or not. If I did, you got to stop me, because I forget what I said in the beginning. So anyway, but he was one of the guys that did me a big favor in 74 when he got out of jail. When I was doing all my nonsense in 74 and trying to make that 16,000 a week big, there were times when Tony Schuler wouldn't call me, and I got jammed up, and I had a 3-state kite going, but sometimes that wasn't enough. And my friend Charlie, who was one of my runners, come up and he says, listen, he says, I can get $100,000 counterfeit money for 10,000. And they're really good. You can't tell. So I gave him 10,000. He come back with 100,000. And I said, okay. And I was sending my runners out, and I says, look, just mix this in with some of the bets that we're making. Try to give it in. Just get rid of it. Try to wash it. Even if we have to go to a track and bet 5,000 on a favorite that looks like it can't lose, just to wash the money, just to switch the money, which I did at Belmont and Aquatook, because I made good friends with some of the tellers there, and they gave them 10% or whatever I was able. If I put 1,000 in bad money, we just switched money.
Did they ever notice?
Well, they knew because I told them. But
money.
You mean race tracks?
Yeah. Did they ever notice the money? Like,
oh God, there was a big investigation. I can't get into that because my good friend who I grew up with, was the head of security and mutuals. I really shouldn't get into this, but he was head of security and mutuals, and he was the one responsible for me getting my license back in the early 90s after I was barred for life. See what I mean? I tell you these bits and pieces, and it's hard for you to put it all together. But anyway, and then I forget where I was. But I see the picture up here, Frank Collada. So Frank Collada, when he got out of jail. Oh, so anyway, my friend, when he gets the counterfeit money, Charlie, he tries to buy a car with counterfeit money. He gets caught. He goes to jail. He winds up in the same jail in Indiana, I think, with Frank Collada. So I go to visit him once, and he introduced me to Frank. And he says, I told Frank all about the problem you have with with Tony Shula. He don't call you, you're getting jammed up and this and that. He knows everything. So Frank says, I think I might be able to help you. I'm being released in another week or 2 weeks, whatever it was. He says, can you hang on? And I says, well, I don't have a choice. Of course. He says, all right, call me. So he calls me, and he says, look, we got to go out. I'm not supposed to leave because I'm on paper. I'm on parole. He says, but I got to fly out. We got to fly to Vegas, and I'm going to take the shot because Tony Spilatro, the guy, the guy who Joe Pesci played in the movie Casino, another whack job.
Yeah.
He says he won't see you without me. So we go out there, and I tell Tony the whole story, and he's all excited because we're fixing races and everything. All we got to do is find this guy and tell him to keep calling me like he's been calling me, and that's what he did. So he sends this guy Herbie Blitzstein, 6.5 feet tall, a big stone killer. And he sends 2 or 3 of his guys with him. We find out. We wind up finding Shula, and they stay with him. They bust open the door, and they put a gun through the roof of his mouth almost, and they said, we're here, you're going to start doing the right thing, you're going to be calling Larry like you're supposed to. And they stayed with him for 3-4 months.
Wasn't Shula a made man?
He was with the Chicago crew. He wasn't in New York. He was Shula. No, he was Whitey Bulger's guy. No, he wasn't.
Yeah. He wasn't a made man.
He was a fat slob jerk off. That's what he was. Pushed his weight around. He was not a nice guy. And I wound up saving his life with Whitey Bulger because he did a couple of things that he shouldn't have did with Bulger in the beginning. But I'll wind up getting into that story and forget what I was talking about. But we would start making a lot of money, and Spilatro made a lot of money. We called him up all the time, and he was making a lot of money because back then, in fact, that year, I think it was the Stardust that opened up for the first time a sports book, and they took horse bets. So he was cleaning up out there, and he loved it. Now, why did I start telling this story? Do you remember? You're gonna have to.
It was about we were talking about your association with Collada.
Okay, so anyway, so so that's what we did. That's how I first met Frank Collada in 74, 75. So now, years later, he calls me up. He says, remember that thing? Because he was one of the first ones to start this whole podcast bullshit with the mob stuff.
I know. Yeah, he was.
And in fact, if I have a picture, I should have sent it to you about the bus that he created. He created a beautiful bus, must cost him a few $100,000, and he painted it all. I'm going to send you the picture. And he painted it all, and it was going to be his tour bus, plus the back half of the bus was going to be a studio where he did his podcast. And so he calls me. He says, "Listen," he says, "I'm writing another book, and it's called. In fact, I have the book up there. He sent it to me. I never even read it. The Tales of a Casino Mobster or something like that." And he says that chapter, the chapter that you gave me permission to put in, I get asked about the most. So you should write your own story, because he knew of my life. And that's what prompted me to write the book, because at that point I was doing nothing. So I wrote the book and they sent it out to California. And I think I told this last time when Sony Pictures, we made the deal. So
Yeah.
so
How
that's
did
how that Collada was responsible for that. And then
how did you feel about Collada cooperating?
well, it's tough. I got asked that question a lot of times. In fact, when they were making the movie Casino, my friend Alfred Natoli, who's Pesci's double, and who became very, very friendly with Collada, nobody wanted, Pesci didn't want to be around him because he was afraid somebody was going to come in and shoot him, and because he was a government witness. But
Oh,
it's tough for me to comment on that, because everybody on my podcast, what happened one day, they asked me about why I didn't cooperate, and I said I just couldn't give up these 4 kids that used to work for me, that were like part of my family for years. I just couldn't give up. And then I start getting a lot of questions about that. But how could you not give up? Because on the other hand, where I was at that time, I had Charles Susky saying a lot of powerful people get me to where I was at that time, with almost 100 horses, millions of dollars in the bank and everything. Then people supported me. So how could you not give up these 4 kids and disappoint and lose everything that I had? Millions of dollars, horses, a good reputation finally back, and give it all up to protect 4 kids that are broke, racing at Monticello, been broke, living in tack rooms. And in fact, one of my owners, Aaron Wagman, says, look, we'll give them, each of these guys, we'll give them $200,000 apiece. These 4 kids won't earn $200,000 the rest of their life. We'll give them $200,000 apiece. Let them take the 6-month rap, and you just tell the commission everything. And I said, I can't do that. I just can't do that. And I lost everything. I went from some of the wealthiest people in the country that gave me opportunities where I could have been a billionaire today. I gave all of that up to protect 4 guys. Now, my co-host was starting to aggravate me when he said, you did the right thing. Now, my co-host is a convicted felon. My co-host's father spent 46 years in jail. My co-host's father was the guy who brought Robert Cabert into the criminal life when they were kids. They grew up together, but he was smart enough to take the second position instead of the top position. But he was the man. His name is Juicy, Vincent D. DeMonica, Juicy, which is the real reason Cabert got to where he was. So he's telling me, you did the right thing. You did the right thing. Now, I went to 2 mob guys, one young in their 30s, but a heavyweight guy, a captain, and one underboss who's in the 70s. And I told them the whole story, and I just asked their opinion. The older guy said, you did the right thing. Yeah, but what about all the people that supported me, that invested millions of dollars in me to get me where I was? I like turned my back on them to support 4 guys who had nothing, will never have anything. And his answer was, you did the right thing. Now, the younger guy, the 30-year-old guy, said, you should have gave him the money. You should have gave the 4 guys the money. Tell the commission what they wanted to know. He says, and that was my advice. So I asked on my podcast, I asked all the listeners, I says, do me a favor, because this guy next to me, Jimmy, who's my co-host, he says you did the right thing. In the meantime, I lived in a park bench and had nothing. I says, and today I still have nothing. I don't have 1/10 of what I had, and not 1% of what I could have had I did. I says, so what I want you to do, listeners, is send in your opinion. Did I do the right thing or didn't I do the right thing? 99% said I should have gave them the money and kept what I had. So when you asked me, what do you think about these guys who gave up, who became government witnesses? First of all, the reason I didn't do it was because, and I don't know how to explain it, my vocabulary is so limited that that's what happens when you hang around horses your whole life, is I don't know how to explain it, but it's in my DNA. I just couldn't get myself to do it. Now, if somebody had a gun to my head and said, I'm going to blow your brains out, maybe I would have changed my mind. Who knows? But I think I would have took the bullet, only because it's not even because I was raised that way, because somebody said them words, you don't give up your friends. I think it's more than that. I think it's in me. And I'll give you another example. When I went on one of these trials, there was the guy, Joe Landau, who was the guy that started this whole bullshit and really looked to nail me. We were out, me and the lawyer, we were standing on the sidewalk, and a couple of people come by, and he stepped back and I stepped back so there would be a lane on the sidewalk. And the fourth person in, the last guy walking, was Joe Landau. And I'm just getting ready because I see him. I just wanted to hit him. I just wanted to hit him, and I hope he went down because I would have chomped on his head. But the lawyer saw me. Like, don't do nothing stupid. Don't do nothing stupid. And I didn't. He stopped me from doing it. And that was 40 years ago. Today, I still get myself crazy because all I wanted to do was hit him. That's all I wanted to do. I can't. It's tough to live with that I didn't do it. So now, I think it's in my DNA. That's my answer to that. But as far as these other guys goes, and some of these guys I know a little bit, and the government puts you in positions where, with this RICO stuff, where something you used to get 3, 4, 5 years from, now it's life, and it's tough. And then in a couple of cases, like Dominic
Cali,
and
yeah.
Maybe 1 or 2 other guys, you go to jail, and then it's not like it was supposed to be. They don't support you. They don't support your wife. They don't support your family. They just abandon you and take whatever you had in the street. When Juicy went to jail, he had $1 million in the street. He come out, he had nothing. And so how do you stay loyal to that kind of behavior and activity in a gang that's not supposed to do that? A member's not supposed to go out with another, but I know 1 or 2 bosses that took wives and girlfriends away from their captains and soldiers. And what the fuck? I know you're not supposed to deal drugs, and yet the whole thing is a contradiction. So, and it just seems that the only rule that has to be kept is you don't rat. But in the meantime, so I can't really comment on that. And I know for sure that Frank Collada, it killed for 10 years. He wanted to kill himself. He didn't want to do what he did. But when Spilatro lied to the Chicago bosses and said, it's not me, it's Frank, and they said, well, get rid of him, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? There's no loyalty. Now, I'm sure that if Collada said, yeah, it's me and Frank, and they said, okay, well,